single grain of table salt rests between the thumb and the forefinger. It is a tiny, unassuming cube, its sharp edges pressing faintly into the ridges of the skin. To the touch, it is a negligible speck of crystalline matter, a geometric arrangement of sodium and chlorine ions locked in a rigid lattice. This microscopic architecture is the result of ancient seas evaporating over millions of years, leaving behind a mineral so light that it possesses a mass of less than 1 milligram. In the quiet theatre of the everyday, this object represents the bottom of our sensory ladder, a fragment of the world so small that it is often brushed away without a second thought. Yet, this tiny volume of space holds the potential to host a density that would unmake the very foundations of reality. The human mind is tuned to the middle world, a narrow band of existence where a gram is light and a mountain is heavy. This intuition is a survival mechanism, but it is a lie when applied to the wider cosmos. If the entire mass of the planet Earth, every ocean, every mountain range, the iron core and the vast atmosphere, were to be seized by an external force and crushed down into the volume of that single grain of salt, the resulting object would transcend the laws of common sense. The Earth, with a mass of approximately 5 sextillion, 972 quintillion metric tons, would no longer be a blue marble teeming with life. It would become a microscopic black hole, a point of infinite density known as a singularity, wrapped in an event horizon no larger than the crystal it replaced. The consequences of holding such an object are immediate and catastrophic. There is no period of adjustment, no slow realization of danger. The moment this compressed Earth occupies the space between the fingers, the gravitational field it generates ceases to be a gentle tug and becomes a predatory force. Because the mass is concentrated into such a small volume, the inverse square law of gravity dictates that the strength of the pull at the surface of the grain is trillions of times stronger than the gravity we feel standing on the surface of the natural Earth. The difference in gravitational pull between the tip of the thumb and the knuckle, a distance of only a few centimeters, is so vast that it creates tidal forces capable of overcoming the electromagnetic bonds holding human cells together. The hand does not simply feel heavy, it is dismantled. The skin, the muscle, and the bone are elongated into thin strands of subatomic particles as they are drawn toward the center of the grain. This process, often referred to as spaghettification, happens at the speed of sound, then the speed of light. The surrounding air is sucked into the void with such violence that the friction of the gas molecules ignites, creating a halo of lethal radiation. The room, the building, and the very ground beneath the feet are pulled into the maw of this tiny, dark god. The paradox of scale is laid bare. An object the size of a speck of dust possesses the power to consume a world, proving that in the universe, size is a mask that hides the true potency of mass. This is the fundamental error of our perception. We equate volume with importance and diameter with power. We look at the vast, empty reaches of the night sky and assume that the giants we see there, the stars and the galaxies, are the only masters of the cosmic stage. We have spent centuries building a civilization based on the predictable behavior of matter at our own scale. We have mapped the continents, weighed the atmosphere, and calculated the orbits of the planets with a sense of mastery. But beneath this thin veneer of understanding lies the scale paradox, a reality where the microscopic and the macroscopic are fused in ways that defy our most basic logic. The grain of salt is a reminder that we are surrounded by thresholds we do not yet fully comprehend. For decades, the textbooks of our youth provided a comfortable narrative of a universe that was orderly and scaled to our expectations. We were taught that the centers of galaxies were governed by supermassive giants that followed the rules of general relativity with a predictable, if grand, elegance. We believed that as long as we understood the mass of an object, we could understand its influence. We were wrong. The universe does not care for our definitions of small or large, light or heavy. It operates on a spectrum where the most extreme densities can hide in the smallest volumes, waiting for our technology to catch up to the reality of their existence. As the hand is drawn into the singularity of the salt grain Earth, the fabric of space-time itself is seen to be fragile. It is not a rigid stage upon which the play of the universe is performed, but a flexible, vulnerable sheet that can be punctured by the weight of a planet if that weight is concentrated enough. This realization marks the beginning of a new era of human inquiry. We're no longer looking for the biggest things in the sky. We're looking for the places where the most mass is hidden, in the least amount of space. We're searching for the cracks in the standard model, the places where our intuition fails, and the true, terrifying nature of the cosmos is revealed. The scale paradox is not just a mathematical curiosity, it is the key to unlocking the mysteries of the most massive structures in the known universe, beginning with a region of space that has haunted astronomers for over 16 years. In the year 2008, the horizon of human knowledge was defined by the reach of charge-coupled devices and the resolution of ground-based mirrors. During this era, the astronomical community operated under a veil of quiet confidence, believing that the grand architecture of the cosmos had been largely mapped and its primary inhabitants classified. It was within this atmosphere of certainty that a survey of the deep southern sky first registered a faint amber smudge in a region that would eventually be designated as 3I Atlas. To the instruments of the time, this distant beacon was nothing more than a collection of grainy pixels, a ghostly impression of starlight that had travelled for billions of years across the expanding void. The data gathered during those initial observations was limited by the very technology that sought to interpret it. The light from 3I Atlas was smeared across the detectors, its fine details lost to the blurring effects of the Earth's atmosphere and the relatively low sensitivity of the era's infrared sensors. Astronomers viewed the system through a glass darkly. They saw a smooth, featureless oval of light, a classic hallmark of a standard elliptical galaxy. In the taxonomic records of 2008, such a galaxy was considered a solved problem. It was viewed as a cosmic retirement home, a vast, stable collection of aging, reddish stars that had long since exhausted their reservoirs of gas and ceased the chaotic, violent business of star formation. The name itself, 3I Atlas, was born from this period of low-resolution ambiguity. In the initial spectroscopic plates, the galactic core appeared to possess three distinct peaks of luminosity, 3 points of concentrated light that seemed to peer out from the darkness like the eyes of a primordial beast. Scientists at the time hypothesized that these were merely 3 separate star clusters, or perhaps the remnants of smaller galaxies recently consumed by the larger host. This interpretation fit neatly within the established galactic models. It required no new physics, no radical shifts in understanding, and no questioning of the fundamental laws governing the mass of galactic centers. The scientific community of the late 2010s was characterized by a specific kind of complacency. They possessed a robust framework known as the Standard Galactic Model, which provided a reliable ratio between the amount of light a galaxy emitted and the amount of mass it contained. By measuring the total luminosity of 3I Atlas, researchers calculated its weight with a sense of routine. They estimated the central engine to be a supermassive black hole of approximately 4 billion solar masses. This was a significant number, certainly, but it was well within the expected parameters for a galaxy of its size. It was a comfortable discovery, a data point that reinforced the status quo rather than challenging it. This reliance on low-resolution data created a false sense of mastery over the 3I Atlas system. The blurred light was treated as a complete picture, and the gaps in the data were filled with the assumptions of the time. Because the galaxy did not exhibit the violent, high-energy flares associated with active galactic nuclei, it was dismissed as a dormant giant. It was archived as a standard elliptical, a predictable structure that would follow the slow, entropic path toward heat death without further surprise. The 3 eyes were seen as a decorative quirk of its geometry, rather than a warning of the structural anomalies lurking within. Beneath this surface of academic calm, the true nature of the system remained hidden. The light that reached the telescopes in 2008 was a lie of omission. It carried the signature of a mass so concentrated and a structure so complex that the instruments of that decade were fundamentally incapable of translating it. The astronomers were like cartographers trying to map a mountain range by looking at the shadows it cast on a distant wall. They saw the shape, but they missed the substance. They measured the height, but they could not feel the weight of the stone. For over a decade, 3i Atlas remained a footnote in the grand catalogues of the sky. It sat in digital archives, a collection of ones and zeros representing a galaxy that everyone believed they understood. This period of quietude was essential for the paradox that was to follow. It established a baseline of human expectation that would eventually be shattered. The three eyes were not mere clusters, and the mass was not 4 billion suns. The universe was simply waiting for human technology to sharpen its gaze, allowing the light to finally tell a story that the textbooks of 2008 were not yet prepared to print. The complacency of the early 21st century was the silence before a gravitational storm, a time when the scale of our ignorance was as vast as the very space we sought to measure. Inside the fluorescent-lit classrooms of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, 16-year-old students sat before open textbooks that promised a coherent and solved universe. They were taught the standard galactic model, with the same absolute finality as the laws of thermodynamics or the periodic table of elements. On those glossy pages, galaxies were depicted as elegant swirling carousels of light, governed by a single central anchor. This anchor was always described as a supermassive black hole, a gravitational titan whose mass was neatly and predictably proportional to the bulge of stars surrounding it. The curriculum emphasized a reliable balance. The more stars a galaxy possessed, the heavier its central heart must be. This was the M-sigma relation, a mathematical tether that bound the microscopic movements of individual suns to the macroscopic scale of the galactic core, creating a sense of order that felt both ancient and unbreakable. To these students, and indeed to the professors who taught them, the universe was a place of solved equations and comfortable ratios. They learned that by observing the speed at which stars orbited the centre of a system, one could weigh the invisible ghost at the heart of the galaxy. If the stars moved at a certain velocity, the mass was known. If the light reached a certain intensity, the density was understood. There was a profound comfort in this proportionality. It suggested a cosmos that was not only observable, but fundamentally sensible. The supermassive black holes at the centres of galaxies like the Milky Way or Andromeda were presented as the ultimate yet understandable extremes of nature, the heavy gears that kept the celestial clockwork turning in a rhythmic, predictable dance. However, as the years progressed and astronomical tools moved beyond the limitations of the 2008 surveys, a subtle but profound tension began to vibrate through the datasets of 3i Atlas. New spectroscopic readings, capable of isolating the light from specific regions of the galactic interior, began to track the velocities of individual stars near the core with unprecedented precision. According to the textbooks, these stars should have been moving at speeds consistent with a central mass of 4 billion suns. They should have been drifting in wide, stately arcs, held in place by a gravitational pull that was powerful but finite. Instead, the data revealed a frenetic and terrifying reality that the standard galactic model could not contain. The stars near the centre of 3i Atlas were not drifting, they were screaming through the void. They were moving at velocities that defied the very limits of the celestial mechanics taught in secondary schools, travelling at hundreds of kilometres per second faster than the predicted maximums. In the cold, objective language of astrophysics, this is known as high-velocity dispersion, but the numbers on the screen told a story of sheer, kinetic violence. To the astronomers watching the data stream across their monitors, it was as if they were observing a group of children on a merry-go-round that was spinning so fast it should have been torn asunder by its own centrifugal force. By all the rules of the old world, these stars should have been flung out into the intergalactic waste, escaping the galaxy's grip entirely. The fact that these stars remained bound to the core, held in tight and frantic orbits, meant only one thing: the central anchor was far heavier than anyone had dared to calculate. The three eyes of the system, once dismissed as mere clusters of light, were now seen as the visible symptoms of a gravitational engine so potent it was warping the very laws of orbital motion. The tension between the observed light and the measured motion grew into a full-scale crisis of classification. If the stars were moving at these impossible speeds, the mass at the centre could not be 4 billion solar masses. It had to be 10 times that, perhaps even more. The textbook diagrams of the past began to look like the simplistic maps of ancient mariners who marked the edges of the world with warnings of mythical monsters. This discrepancy created a widening rift in the scientific narrative. The certainty of the classroom was replaced by a frantic search for the missing mass that must be hiding within the amber glow of 3i Atlas. Astronomers began to realize that the light they had been measuring for over a decade was a mask, a thin veil of luminous matter draped over a dark, crushing reality. The stars were the unwilling messengers of this hidden truth, their impossible speed serving as a direct contradiction to the simplified universe of the secondary education system. The cosmos was revealing itself to be a place where the rules were not merely broken, but rewritten by the sheer presence of concentrated mass. The realization dawned that 3i Atlas was not an outlier to be ignored, but a challenge to the very foundations of how we believe galaxies evolve. The standard galactic model was failing to account for a structure that operated on a scale of density that the 16-year-old students of the past could not have imagined. The search for the source of this gravity became the primary mission of a new generation of observers who understood that the standard universe was merely a tiny, brightly lit room, and they were about to step out into a vast, dark, and infinitely more heavy landscape. The stage was set for a confrontation with a mass so great it would redefine the limits of the possible. The resolution of this cosmic discrepancy arrived with the deployment of the James Webb Space Telescope, a golden eye positioned 1,500,000 kilometers from Earth at the second Lagrange point. This instrument represented the pinnacle of human engineering, a vast array of 18 hexagonal mirrors coated in a thin layer of gold, designed to capture the faintest whispers of infrared radiation from the dawn of time. While previous observatories had been blinded by the thick, impenetrable shrouds of cosmic dust that choke the center of the 3i Atlas system, the new telescope possessed a specific weapon capable of piercing this celestial veil, the mid-infrared instrument known as MIRI. MIRI operated in a realm of light invisible to the human eye, detecting the heat signatures of objects buried deep within the most opaque nebulae. For eons, the core of 3i Atlas had remained a secret, its true nature protected by layers of soot and gas that scattered visible light like a thick fog. But to the mid-infrared instrument, this dust became transparent. The telescope slewed across the darkness, its sensors cooled to a temperature of less than 7 degrees above absolute zero to ensure that its own heat did not drown out the signals from the deep. When the shutters opened and the light from the galactic center finally fell upon the detectors, the reality that emerged was far more terrifying than the blurred shadows of 2008 had suggested. The data arrived at the processing centers on Earth as a stream of binary code, a digital ghost of a reality billions of light years away. As the algorithms reconstructed the image and the spectroscopic signatures were analyzed, a profound silence fell over the rooms of the mission scientists. The measurements of the stellar velocities near the core were no longer approximations. They were precise, undeniable records of a gravitational field that defied every existing model of galactic evolution. The previous estimate of 4 billion solar masses, a number that had sat comfortably in the databases for over a decade, was not merely a slight underestimation. It was a catastrophic error of scale. The new calculations, derived from the sharp, dust-free view provided by MIRI, revealed a central mass of 60 billion suns. This was not a subtle correction. It was a tenfold increase that shattered the proportionality of the standard galactic model. To find 60 billion solar masses concentrated within the heart of a single galaxy was the equivalent of discovering a mountain where the map had promised a molehill. The energy required to hold such a mass together, and the gravitational influence it exerted on its surroundings, moved the 3i Atlas core into a category of existence for which there was no precedent. The immediate fallout within the scientific community was a mixture of awe and professional crisis. The consensus that had governed the study of elliptical galaxies for a generation collapsed in an afternoon. If a single galaxy could harbour a dark heart of 60 billion suns, then the entire history of how black holes grow and how galaxies are assembled was fundamentally flawed. The M-sigma relation, that once reliable tether between the galactic bulge and the central black hole, was severed. The data suggested that the core of 3i Atlas had grown at a rate, or through a mechanism, that the current laws of physics could not explain. It was as if a hidden engine had been running in the dark, accumulating mass with a gluttony that bypassed all known limits of cosmic accretion. This revelation turned the 3i Atlas system from a distant curiosity into the most significant laboratory in the known universe. The 60 billion suns represented a density of matter so extreme that the space around them was no longer a vacuum, but a warped and tortured fabric under constant agonizing strain. The 3Is were finally understood not as clusters, but as the intensely luminous regions where the gravity of this 60 billion solar mass titan was pulling in entire solar systems, shredding them into incandescent ribbons of gas before they vanished into the dark. The textbooks were discarded, and the search for a new physics began, driven by the realization that the universe was capable of producing structures that were not just large, but fundamentally impossible by the standards of human intuition. The discovery of the 60 billion suns was the moment the scale paradox moved from a theoretical warning to a physical, crushing reality. The physical dimensions of the 3i Atlas core present a mechanical reality that contradicts every human instinct regarding volume and mass. To understand the density of this 60 billion solar mass engine, one must look at the spatial geometry of our own neighbourhood. The solar system, stretching from the searing surface of the Sun to the frozen, lonely reaches of the Kuiper Belt, is a vast expanse of nearly empty space. If this entire volume, spanning billions of kilometres, were scaled down to the size of a common household bathtub, it would contain only a few scattered specks of dust representing the planets and a single, glowing marble representing the Sun. It is a system defined by its hollowness, a fragile arrangement of matter drifting through a vacuum. The core of 3i Atlas operates on an entirely different structural logic. This discovery is the equivalent of taking that same bathtub-sized solar system and replacing it with a thimble, then attempting to force the entire mass of the Pacific Ocean into that thimble. The Pacific Ocean, a body of water containing approximately 1 quintillion, 400 quadrillion metric tons of liquid, possesses a scale that dwarfs human comprehension. It covers 1/3 of the planet's surface and plunges to depths where the pressure is enough to crush steel like paper. Yet, in the density paradox of the 3i Atlas core, the universe has seized this entire ocean. Every drop of water, every grain of salt, and every living creature within its depths, and packed it into a space no larger than a human fingertip. At this level of compression, the traditional laws of physics do not merely fail, they buckle and groan under a mechanical strain that strips matter of its identity. In a normal environment, atoms are mostly empty space, with electrons orbiting a tiny nucleus at vast distances. But within the core of 3i Atlas, the gravitational pressure is so immense that this empty space is annihilated. The electrons are forced into the nuclei, merging with protons to form a solid degenerate sea of neutrons. This is matter in its most compact form, where a single teaspoon of the material would weigh as much as a mountain range. The core is not a collection of stars or gas. It is a singular monolithic slab of reality, where the distance between particles has been reduced to zero. The space surrounding this thimble of Pacific Ocean mass is a theatre of absolute geometric distortion. Gravity here is not a distant tug, but a physical crushing force that warps the very path of light. Around the 60 billion solar mass centre, there exists a region known as the photon sphere. In this thin, lethal shell, the gravity is so precisely balanced and so overwhelmingly powerful that light particles, or photons, are forced into circular orbits. A beam of light travelling through this region does not move in a straight line. It circles the core like a satellite, meaning that if a witness were to stand within this sphere, they would see the back of their own head as the light they emitted travelled around the circumference of the dark heart and returned to their eyes. This density creates a gravitational gradient so steep that it acts as a tidal shredder. Any object approaching the core, be it a stray planet or a massive star, experiences a difference in pull between its leading and trailing edges that exceeds the internal forces holding its atoms together. The star is not simply pulled in, it is elongated, stretched into a ribbon of plasma thousands of kilometres long, and then pulverised into its constituent subatomic particles. This is the mechanical reality of 60 billion suns occupying a volume that should, by all rights, be impossible. The thimble of 3i Atlas is a point of such profound structural integrity that it acts as an anchor for the entire galaxy, yet it is so small that it remains invisible to the naked eye, hidden behind the very light it consumes. The strain on the fabric of space-time in this region is visible in the way the vacuum itself reacts. The vacuum is not empty. It is a medium that can be stretched, torn and twisted. Under the influence of the 3i Atlas core, space-time behaves like a fabric being pulled through a needle's eye. The curvature is so extreme that time itself slows to a crawl relative to the outside universe. A second passing near the edge of this density would equate to years, or even centuries in the world beyond. This is not a poetic metaphor, but a mathematical consequence of the density paradox. The core has created a pocket of reality where the fundamental constants of the universe are pushed to their breaking points, revealing a hidden architecture of mass that the standard models of the 20th century were never designed to accommodate. The Pacific Ocean in a thimble is the signature of a universe that does not respect the boundaries of human logic. It proves that mass is the ultimate architect of the cosmos, and that volume is merely a temporary state of matter. The 3i Atlas core stands as a silent, crushing proof that the most powerful forces in existence do not require the most space. They require only the most concentration. The result is a gravitational engine that defies the textbooks, a dark and heavy heart that continues to draw the surrounding galaxy into its impossible, microscopic embrace, proving that the scale of our world is a mere shadow compared to the crushing reality of the deep cosmos. The universe usually demands a price for such an immense concentration of matter, and that price is paid in the currency of light. According to the foundational principles of astrophysics, a mass of 60 billion suns should be the most luminous object in its corner of the cosmos. This expectation is rooted in the Sultan argument, a cornerstone of galactic evolution, which posits that the growth of supermassive black holes is inextricably linked to the radiation they emit. As gas, dust, and entire star systems are drawn into the gravitational well of a central engine, they do not simply vanish. They are accelerated to relativistic speeds, colliding and churning in a massive accretion disk. The resulting friction generates temperatures in the millions of degrees, causing the disk to scream with light across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, from radio waves to lethal X-rays. By this logic, the heart of 3i Atlas should be a quasar of such brilliance that it would outshine the combined light of its billions of constituent stars. But the core of 3i Atlas is a ghost. It presents a phenomenon known as the dark core, a physical state that contradicts the very light-to-mass ratio upon which the Sultan argument is built. When the mid-infrared instrument of the James Webb Space Telescope peered through the dust, it found the gravitational signature of 60 billion suns, but it found almost none of the expected thermal glow. There is no brilliant accretion disk swirling around this titan. There is no jet of superheated plasma erupting from its poles to pierce the intergalactic void. Instead, there is only an eerie, crushing silence. The core is a cold, lightless engine, a gravitational machine that has entered a state of profound and terrifying dormancy. This missing light problem suggests a history that defies our current understanding of how these giants feed. If the Sultan argument holds true for the rest of the universe, it means that the growth of a black hole is a visible process. We should be able to look back through cosmic time and see the flares of energy that mark the accumulation of these 60 billion solar masses. Yet, the spectroscopic records of 3i Atlas show no evidence of such a violent past. It is as if this mass appeared in the centre of the galaxy, without the necessary fireworks, bypassing the traditional stages of accretion that define every other known supermassive system. The core sits in the darkness like a predator that has already finished its meal, its presence known only by the way it bends the paths of the stars around it. The mechanical reality of this dormancy is even more unsettling when one considers the density of the surrounding galactic centre. In a standard elliptical galaxy, the core is usually awash in stray gas and aging stars, providing a constant trickle of fuel for the central black hole. In 3i Atlas, this fuel is present, yet the engine remains cold. This suggests a state of perfect gravitational efficiency, or perhaps a configuration of matter so extreme that it has moved beyond the phase of messy, luminous consumption. It is a lightless sinkhole in the fabric of reality, an object that consumes everything in its path, light, time, and matter, without emitting a single photon of warning. The darkness of the core is not a mere absence of light. It is a physical property of a system that has become so heavy it has effectively choked off its own ability to radiate energy. This dormancy challenges the very timeline of the universe. To reach a mass of 60 billion suns through the slow, light-emitting processes we understand would take longer than the current age of the cosmos. The existence of the 3I Atlas core implies that there are other ways for mass to aggregate. Darker, faster, and more efficient ways that do not rely on the friction of an accretion disk. It points toward a dark cluster, or a direct collapse mechanism that operates in the shadows, creating monuments of gravity that remain invisible to our traditional telescopes. The core is a reminder that our reliance on light as the primary messenger of the universe is a limitation of our own biology and technology. The silence of the dark core is a mechanical testament to the scale paradox. It proves that the most influential structures in the galaxy can be the ones that say the least. While the stars in the outer reaches of 3I Atlas continue their frantic, high-velocity dance, the engine that drives them remains a cold, unblinking eye of pure gravity. It is a machine that does not need to glow to be felt. It is a monument to a universe that can build 60 billion suns worth of reality in total, absolute darkness, leaving us to wonder how many other such engines are currently drifting through the void, silent and hungry, their presence masked by the very perfection of their own gravitational grip. This lightless state is the ultimate expression of the power of mass, a force so great that even the energy of its own creation has been pulled back into the singularity, leaving nothing behind but the weight of the void. The 60 billion solar mass heart of 3I Atlas is not a static monolith, resting in frozen perfection at the center of its kingdom. It is a spinning dynamo of unprecedented proportions, a rotating anchor that possesses a kinetic energy so vast it defies the traditional boundaries between matter and the vacuum. In the early 20th century, specifically in the year 1918, the physicists Joseph Lenz and Hans Thirring predicted that a massive rotating object would not merely sit within the fabric of space-time, but would actively pull that fabric along with it as it turned. This phenomenon, known as frame dragging, is a subtle whisper of a force when applied to a planet like the Earth, or even a standard star. But at the scale of 60 billion suns, the whisper becomes a roar, and the subtle pull becomes a violent, all-consuming vortex. The rotation of this central mass literally twists the geometry of the universe. Space-time in the 3I Atlas core does not behave like an empty stage or a rigid grid. It behaves like a viscous fluid, a thick and heavy medium that's being churned by the invisible hand of an immense gravitational torque. As the core spins, it creates a lens-throwing effect of such magnitude that the very concepts of stationary or straight cease to have meaning. The vacuum is dragged in the direction of the rotation, forced into a spiral that accelerates as one approaches the event horizon. This is the mechanical reality of a temporal whirlpool, where the floor of the universe itself is moving, carrying everything within it on a mandatory journey around the dark center. The stars that orbit this 60 billion solar mass engine are the primary witnesses to this spatial distortion. Their trajectories are not the simple, closed ellipses described by classical Newtonian mechanics. Instead, they are complex, precessing paths that are being physically dragged through the churning wake of the core's rotation. A star attempting to move in a straight line finds itself being deflected, its orbit shifting and wobbling as it encounters the viscous drag of the space-time vortex. To an outside observer, it appears as though these stars are being caught in a celestial current, their light and motion being steered by a force that has no physical surface, yet possesses the strength to redirect the path of a sun. This frame dragging at scale creates a unique orbital signature that can be measured across the light years. The precession of these orbits, the way the entire path of a star rotates around the core over time, occurs at a rate that is thousands of times faster than anything predicted by the standard models of galactic centers. The three eyes of the system, those regions of concentrated light and activity, are caught in the most intense part of this vortex. They are being whipped around the centre, not just by the pull of gravity, but by the movement of the space they occupy. The result is a chaotic, beautiful, and terrifying display of celestial mechanics, where the distinction between an object and the space it inhabits begins to blur. The sheer scale of this effect reveals the true nature of the scale paradox. We are accustomed to thinking of space as a passive void, a nothingness that simply exists between the things that matter. But in the presence of 60 billion solar masses, space reveals its own materiality. It can be stretched, it can be compressed, and most importantly, it can be spun. The 3i Atlas core acts as a giant spoon in a cosmic vat of honey, twisting the medium into a spiral that dictates the fate of every particle of dust and every massive star within its reach. This is the ultimate expression of gravitational dominance, the ability to move the universe itself. The mechanical strain of this rotation is so great that it creates a frame-dragging rate that approaches the speed of light at the innermost regions. In this zone, the physics of the everyday world are completely inverted. It is impossible to stand still, even with infinite thrust, because the space you occupy is moving faster than any engine could possibly counter. You are a leaf in a hurricane of space-time, a passenger on a journey dictated by the angular momentum of 60 billion suns. This churning of the vacuum also has profound effects on the time dilation experienced near the core. Because the space is being dragged, the very rhythm of causality is twisted, creating a temporal environment where the sequence of events is influenced by the rotation of the mass. The lens-thirring effect in 3i Atlas is a testament to the fact that the universe is a participatory system. Mass does not just tell space how to curve, it tells space how to flow. The discovery of this unprecedented scale of frame dragging has forced a total re-evaluation of how we calculate the stability of galactic cores. If the space itself is in motion, then the traditional metrics of orbital decay and star formation must be rewritten. The core is not just a destination for matter, it is a kinetic engine that defines the local laws of physics. It stands as a dark, spinning monument to the power of concentration, a vortex that proves that even the most fundamental properties of the universe, the stillness of space, and the linear flow of time, are subject to the whims of a sufficiently massive heart. The stars of 3i Atlas continue their frantic dance, forever caught in the wake of a 60 billion solar mass titan that has turned the vacuum into a whirlpool of pure, unadulterated power. The spectroscopic analysis finalized in the year 2024 provided a resolution that no theorist had anticipated. Until that moment, the 60 billion solar masses were assumed to reside within a single, gargantuan event horizon, a solitary supermassive black hole of unprecedented scale. But as the light from the surrounding stars was dissected into its component wavelengths, the gravitational signature revealed a far more complex and unsettling architecture. The core was not a single point of infinite density, but a fragmented collective. It was a dark cluster, a swarming hive of thousands of intermediate mass black holes and millions of neutron stars, all packed into a volume of space smaller than a few light weeks across. This configuration represents a direct violation of the traditional principles of orbital dynamics. In the standard models of galactic evolution, such a dense collection of collapsed remnants is a temporary state, a chaotic transition that should last only a fraction of a cosmic second. Through a process known as dynamical friction, these heavy objects should lose their orbital energy as they interact with one another, spiraling inward until they collide and merge into a single, monolithic entity. By all the laws of physics established over the last century, a cluster this massive and this compact should have collapsed into a single singularity billions of years ago. The fact that it remains a swarm, a stable, multi-bodied heart, is a mechanical anomaly that defies explanation. The sheer number of entities within this dark cluster is staggering. Within the central thimble of 3i Atlas, there are thousands of black holes, each possessing the mass of 10,000 suns. Interspersed among them are millions of neutron stars, the ultra-dense husks of dead suns, each no larger than a city yet heavier than our entire solar system. They are locked in a frantic, high-speed choreography, a gravitational mosh pit where the velocities are so extreme that the very fabric of space-time is being shredded by thousands of competing vortices. This is the source of the three eyes observed in earlier surveys. They were not clusters of stars, but the regions where the density of these collapsed remnants was so high that their collective gravitational influence created intense gravitational lensing of the distant starlight. The stability of this swarm is the primary mystery of the 2024 analysis. To prevent a total collapse, these thousands of black holes must be engaged in a perfect relativistic dance, where the centrifugal force of their orbits exactly balances the inward pull of their collective 60 billion solar masses. This suggests a level of precision in cosmic architecture that seems almost artificial. It is a configuration where the n-body problem, the notoriously difficult calculation of how multiple objects interact via gravity, has been solved by the universe on a scale of millions. Each black hole and neutron star is a gear in a machine that refuses to grind to a halt, maintaining its separation through a complex web of relativistic interactions and frame-dragging effects. Previously, such a structure was dismissed as a mathematical curiosity, a state of impossibility that existed only in the most extreme simulations. The reasoning was simple. The closer these objects get to one another, the more energy they lose through the emission of gravitational waves. These ripples in space-time carry away the orbital momentum, forcing the objects into an inevitable final embrace. In any other system, the merger of 60 billion solar masses worth of remnants would have produced a gravitational wave event so powerful it would have been felt across the entire observable universe. But here, the merger has stalled. The dark cluster exists in a state of perpetual high-energy tension, a swarm that refuses to become a whole. This discovery forces a radical reconsideration of the missing light problem. A single, supermassive black hole is a messy eater, creating a luminous accretion disk as it consumes gas. But a swarm of thousands of smaller black holes is a far more efficient and subtle predator. Each individual remnant possesses its own small event horizon, and the interactions between them can eject gas and dust out of the core before it has a chance to heat up and glow. The dark cluster is a stealth engine, a fragmented heart that hides its true mass behind a veil of gravitational complexity. It is the ultimate expression of the scale paradox, a system that acts like a single titan from a distance, but reveals itself to be a chaotic, swarming multitude upon closer inspection. The mechanical reality of the 3i Atlas core is thus a monument to the unexpected. It is a place where the rules of merger and collapse have been suspended, replaced by a stable state of hyperdensity that was once thought to be a physical impossibility. The year 2024 will be remembered as the moment we realized that the centers of galaxies do not have to be occupied by single monsters. They can be occupied by armies. This swarming heart of 60 billion suns is a new class of celestial object, a dark cluster that challenges our understanding of entropy and the final fate of concentrated mass. It stands as a reminder that the universe has a far greater repertoire of structures than our textbooks have yet recorded, and that the most massive things in existence may be composed of millions of smaller, equally terrifying parts. The existence of the 3i Atlas core is a monument to the utter indifference of the cosmos. It stands as a silent, crushing proof that the universe operates on a scale where human comprehension is not only unnecessary, but entirely irrelevant to the function of reality. This gravitational engine, a swarming collective of 60 billion solar masses, does not require our equations to maintain its balance, nor does it wait for our permission to warp the fabric of space-time. It is a mechanical certainty, a cold and unblinking eye that has existed for eons before the first human looked at the stars and will continue to spin long after the last of our kind has faded into the dust of a dying planet. There is no malice in its darkness, and no grace in its power. There is only the relentless, automated execution of the laws of physics. 1,000 civilizations, each with their own unique histories, complex languages, and vast empires, could be drawn into the event horizon of this dark cluster with the same total lack of intent as a stone falling into a well. The destruction of an entire species, the erasure of every poem ever written, and the silencing of every prayer ever whispered would not register as even a flicker of light against the magnitude of 60 billion suns. To the universe, a civilization is merely a collection of organic molecules, a brief and fragile arrangement of matter that is subject to the same gravitational fate as a stray cloud of hydrogen gas or a fragment of cosmic dust. The engine of 3i Atlas does not pause to acknowledge the weight of the lives it consumes. It simply adds their mass to its total, a negligible rounding error in a calculation that spans the breadth of a galaxy. This reality stands in stark contrast to the frantic, almost desperate efforts of humanity to map the heavens. We spend centuries refining our telescopes, building machines like the James Webb, and debating the nuances of the standard galactic model in an attempt to impose a sense of order on the void. We name the stars, categorize the galaxies, and search for patterns that might suggest we are part of a larger, more meaningful narrative. But the core of 3i Atlas reveals these efforts to be the localized twitching of a biological species trying to make sense of a machine far too large for its gears to ever truly be seen. Our maps are not the territory. They are the frantic scribblings of a witness trying to describe a storm while being swept away by the wind. The mechanical reality of the galactic centre is devoid of the poetry we project upon it. It is a place of kinetic violence and temporal distortion, where the only script is entropy, and the only law is the conservation of energy. While we seek truth, or beauty in the cosmos, the dark cluster is busy churning the vacuum into a viscous vortex, shredding stars into subatomic ribbons, and dragging the very floor of the universe into a spiral. It is a theatre where the play continues regardless of whether there is an audience in the seats. The stars do not shine for us, and the black holes do not hide from us. They simply fulfill their roles in a cold, mechanical drama that began with the first expansion of space, and will end only when the last light is extinguished. In the face of such overwhelming magnitude, our 16-year-old certainties and our textbook models seem like the toys of children. We believed we understood the boundaries of density and the limits of mass because those limits made sense within the narrow corridor of our perception. But the scale paradox teaches us that our perception is a cage. The universe is not obligated to be understandable. It is only obligated to exist. The 3i Atlas core is a reminder that there are depths of reality that we may never fully plumb, and forces that we will never control. We are observers on a tiny fragile rock, peering through a thin atmosphere at a gravitational titan that could swallow our entire history without a sound. Yet, there is a profound, albeit chilling clarity in this realization. By acknowledging the indifference of the universe, we are forced to confront the true nature of our own existence. We are not the protagonists of the cosmic story, but accidental bystanders in a mechanical process of staggering proportions. The core of 3i Atlas does not care that we have discovered it. It does not care that we have measured its mass or calculated its rotation. It simply continues to spin, a 60 billion solar mass anchor in the dark, serving as a monument to a universe that is vast, heavy, and entirely indifferent to the fact that we are watching. This is the ultimate lesson of the scale paradox. The more we understand the true weight of the cosmos, the more we realize that our presence is not a requirement for the play to continue, but a fleeting, miraculous anomaly in a theatre of cold, crushing stone. The architecture of entropy is the only structure that truly endures within the cosmic theatre, serving as an invisible script that every atom and every galaxy must follow with absolute mechanical obedience. This script is not a narrative of purpose or a chronicle of progress, but a set of stage directions dictating the inevitable transition from order to chaos. It is the silent engine behind the expansion of space and the eventual cooling of the stars. In the presence of the 3i Atlas core, this reality becomes a physical weight. We are forced to recognize that our most cherished scientific certainties, the laws we have meticulously documented over centuries, are merely the localized scribblings of biological organisms clinging to a tiny, fragile rock. These theories are not universal truths, but chemical signals within the nervous systems of primates trying to find a pattern in the dark. We are like ants scurrying across the base of a granite mountain, sensing the vibration of the earth and the heat of the sun-warmed stone without ever possessing the sensory apparatus to comprehend the mountain itself. To an ant, the mountain is not a geological feature born of tectonic collision. It is an infinite, jagged world of impossible scale. The ant may measure the grain of the rock or the speed of a falling pebble, believing it has mastered the physics of its environment, but it remains blissfully unaware of the mass that looms above it, or the millions of years of pressure required to forge such a monument. Our relationship with the 60 billion solar mass dark cluster is no different. We measure the light and calculate the orbits, yet we're still just small, carbon-based entities attempting to weigh the purpose of a gravitational engine that grinds time itself into a fine powder. The mechanical nature of the universe is laid bare in this realization. There is no sentiment in the way the 3i Atlas core shreds a passing star. There is only the cold, automated resolution of a gravitational equation. The universe does not want to increase entropy. It simply does so because the mathematics of the void demand it. The dark cluster is a highly efficient component of this machine, a place where the concentration of mass has reached such a peak that the transition from structured matter to disordered energy is accelerated to a terrifying degree. It is a factory of chaos, turning the orderly orbits of suns into a frantic relativistic swarm that will eventually dissipate into the heat death of the cosmos. This is the only constant, the slow, relentless grinding of the gears toward a state of total equilibrium. Our attempts to define the universe through the lens of human experience are revealed as a biological vanity. We speak of discoveries and revelations as if the cosmos were waiting for us to uncover its secrets, but the 3i Atlas system was functioning perfectly well in its 60 billion solar mass silence for billions of years before the first human looked through a lens. Our science is a localized approximation, a set of rules that work well enough in the low-gravity, low-density environment of our own solar system, but they are revealed as clumsy and incomplete when applied to the deep architecture of the galactic center. The scale paradox is the ultimate humbling force, reminding us that the mountain does not care about the ant's map, and the universe does not care about our textbooks. The script of the cosmic theatre is written in the language of energy gradients and gravitational wells, a dialect that does not translate into the emotional or moral frameworks of human life. In this mechanical drama, we are not the protagonists, nor even the stagehands. We are the microscopic flora growing on the velvet curtains, observing the movement of the heavy machinery with a mix of awe and misunderstanding. The transition from order to chaos is the only plot point that matters, and the 3i Atlas core is a primary actor in that inevitable conclusion. It stands as a dark, spinning proof that the architecture of the universe is built on a scale that renders our presence a fleeting, accidental byproduct of the same entropic forces that will one day tear us apart. This realization does not diminish the beauty of our inquiry, but it changes its character. We are biological machines made of the same atoms that are being crushed in that distant core, yet we are currently in a state of temporary, highly organized complexity. We are a brief flicker of order in a system that is fundamentally chaotic. Our math, our telescopes, and our frantic efforts to understand the dark cluster are the ways in which we attempt to defy the script of entropy, if only for a few decades of a human life. We are the ant that looks up at the mountain and tries to name it, an act that is as futile as it is magnificent. The mountain remains indifferent, the machine continues to turn, and the script of entropy carries us all toward the same silent end, proving that the only thing more vast than the universe itself is the scale of our own insignificance within its mechanical embrace. The moment the data from the year 2024 arrived, it did more than just correct a numerical estimate. It validated the most essential quality of the human species, the capacity to be profoundly, spectacularly wrong. In the rigid world of the machine, an error is a failure, a malfunction that must be purged to maintain the integrity of the system. But in the world of the biological observer, the realization of an error is the highest form of growth. To look at a map of 60 billion suns and admit that the previous map of 4 billion was a childish simplification is an act of intellectual courage. It is the process by which a collection of carbon-based organisms transcends its own limitations, moving from the comfort of a familiar lie toward the cold, sharp edge of a new truth. Each time a textbook is discarded, the species as a whole takes a step forward, shedding the skin of its former ignorance to reveal a more complex and terrifying reality beneath. We are, in the most literal sense, made of the same fundamental particles that are currently being pulverized within the heart of the 3I Atlas core. The iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, and the carbon in our DNA were forged in the same stellar furnaces that now feed the dark cluster. We are biological machines, temporary and fragile arrangements of matter that have somehow gained the ability to look back at the abyss from which we emerged. The atoms being crushed into a degenerate sea of neutrons in that distant galaxy are identical to the atoms that allow a scientist to hold a pen or a child to look through a telescope. We are the same stuff as the stars, yet we have been organized into a configuration that can perceive the passage of time and the curvature of space. Yet there is a singular, staggering difference between the observer and the observed. The 60 billion solar mass engine does not know it exists. It does not calculate its own density, nor does it wonder at the curvature of the space-time it creates. It simply is, a mindless execution of gravitational force. We, however, possess the unique and terrifying ability to calculate the weight of our own insignificance. We are the only part of this vast mechanical system that can look at a thimble containing the Pacific Ocean and understand the magnitude of the paradox. We can measure the distance to the singularity and know with mathematical precision exactly how small we are in relation to the dark. This calculation is not a source of despair, but a milestone of our evolution. To know one's own insignificance is to have first understood the scale of the universe itself. This makes humanity the necessary witness. In a universe of total indifference, we are the ones who give the darkness a name. We look at the 3 eyes of a distant galaxy and transform them from a meaningless arrangement of photons into a mystery to be solved. Without the observer, the 3I Atlas core would spin in a vacuum of absolute silence, its power unremarked upon and its complexity unappreciated. By correcting our maps and refining our instruments, we become the eyes through which the universe finally looks at itself and wonders. We are the localized pocket of order that has developed the capacity to narrate the story of its own entropic end. The cosmos is no longer a silent machine once it is perceived. It becomes a tragedy, a triumph, and a paradox. The transition from the 16-year-old student's certainty to the 2024 revelation is the story of our species. We are a bridge between the microscopic and the macroscopic, a thin line of consciousness that attempts to reconcile the grain of salt with the 60 billion suns. Our value does not lie in our size or our longevity, but in our refusal to accept a simplified version of the world. By embracing the profound significance of being wrong, we turn the terrifying anomaly of the dark cluster into a milestone of human curiosity. We are small, yes, but we are the only part of the machine that has ever stopped to ask how the gears are turning. We are the witness that gives the void a voice, the only part of the 60 billion suns that can stop to ask why they are there at all. In this act of questioning, the insignificance of our physical form is eclipsed by the magnitude of our understanding. We are the eyes of the cosmos looking back into the dark and finding not just a machine, but a reflection of our own endless need to know. The legacy of the 3I Atlas discovery is now etched into the very foundations of modern cosmology, serving as a permanent scar on the face of classical astronomy. What began in 2008 as a blurred amber smudge on a digital sensor has evolved into a pillar of a new physics, one that recognizes the existence of structures far more dense and complex than the 16-year-old certainties of the past could ever allow. The maps of the cosmos have been fundamentally rewritten, their once orderly grids now warped by the inclusion of this 60 billion solar mass dark cluster. We no longer view the centers of galaxies as simple, solitary anchors, but as potential swarms of collapsed remnants, huddling together in a relativistic dance that defies the old laws of merger and collapse. This discovery has transformed our understanding of the scale paradox from a theoretical warning into a physical, crushing reality that dictates the movement of every star in the southern sky. The maps of the heavens are no longer static documents. They have become living records of our own evolving gaze. Where there was once a standard elliptical galaxy, there is now a milestone of human curiosity, a region of space that serves as a laboratory for the most extreme gravitational interactions ever recorded. The M-sigma relation, that once unbreakable tether between a galaxy's light and its central mass, has been discarded in favour of a more nuanced and terrifying reality. We have learned that mass can hide in the darkness, accumulating with a gluttony that bypasses the friction of accretion disks and the emission of light. The three eyes of 3I Atlas are now recognised as the first symptoms of a universe that is far heavier and more efficient than we dared to believe in the early 21st century. This mechanical legacy extends beyond the specific coordinates of a single galaxy. It has forced a re-evaluation of the entire history of the universe. If a structure like the dark cluster can exist in a dormant, lightless state, then the census of the cosmos is incomplete. Astronomers are now searching for the gravitational ghosts of other 60 billion solar mass titans that may be drifting in the void, silent and invisible, their presence masked by the same perfect efficiency that characterizes the 3I Atlas core. We are looking for the places where space-time flows like a liquid, and where the rotation of mass twists the very floor of the universe. The discovery has provided a new set of tools for the next generation of observatories, ensuring that the errors of the past are not repeated, but used as the foundation for a more accurate map of the deep dark. The story of 3I Atlas is a testament to the fact that the most significant discoveries are often the ones that prove us wrong. It is a reminder that the universe does not owe us an explanation, and that its most powerful engines do not require our permission to function. But it is also a reminder that we are the only part of this mechanical system capable of turning that indifference into a narrative. We are the biological machines that have taken the measure of 60 billion suns and found a way to speak their name. We have taken the crushing weight of our own insignificance and turned it into a milestone of scientific progress. The legacy of this discovery is not just the data on the screen or the papers in the journals. It is the realization that our need to know is a force as relentless as gravity itself. The journey into these depths is far from over. Each new instrument we position among the stars and each new calculation we perform in the quiet of a laboratory brings us closer to the next paradox, the next contradiction, and the next revelation. The history of the universe is a script that is still being written, and we are the only ones present to read the lines. To remain a witness to these revelations, to follow the data as it tears down the walls of the old world and builds the new, is the fundamental mission of this exploration. It is a journey that requires us to be brave enough to be wrong and curious enough to look again when the darkness remains silent. By joining this journey and subscribing to this channel, you become a part of the collective eye that looks back at the 60 billion solar mass heart of the cosmos. You join a community of observers who refuse to accept the simplified maps of the past and instead seek the heavy, complex truths of the deep dark. Together, we will continue to weigh the stars, name the voids, and track the flow of space-time as it churns around the most massive structures in existence. The 3I Atlas core stands as a monument to what we have found, but it is only the beginning of what we have yet to see. Join us as we continue to explore the history of the universe, ensuring that the flame of human curiosity never flickers out in the face of the overwhelming, magnificent, and utterly indifferent dark.